The quiet hum of a roadside market is shattered by the distant roar of motorcycles. Locals glance up as a group of bikers, clad in leather and oozing arrogance, pull up and begin strutting around like they own the place. They're loud, rude, and looking for trouble, tossing snide remarks and pushing their weight around. Among the small crowd, one man keeps to himself, a farmer, standing by his produce stand, weathered hands resting on his display of fresh fruits and vegetables. The bikers take notice of him, sensing an easy target. They circle, taunting and laughing, but the farmer doesn't flinch. He just stands there, calm and collected, as if he's seen this kind of bravado 100 times before. Then, with a subtle smile and a flick of his wrist, he does something that stops them cold. What happens next? Let's just say these bikers picked the wrong farmer. The market falls silent as the farmer steps forward, his calm demeanor now carrying an edge of quiet authority. The bikers exchange amused glances, clearly not taking him seriously. "What's your deal, old man?" One of them sneers, stepping closer, his voice dripping with mockery. But the farmer doesn't answer. Instead, he adjusts his hat, his eyes locking onto the group with a steady gaze that seems to pierce through their tough exteriors. Whispers ripple through the crowd. "That's Dan," someone mutters. They have no idea who they're messing with. Another vendor nods, a mix of curiosity and unease in their expression. The bikers, still oblivious to the farmer's reputation, start to push further, grabbing an apple from his stand and tossing it between their hands. But Dan doesn't react. It's as if he's waiting for something, a moment to act. And when it comes, it won't be what anyone expects. The leader of the bikers, a burly guy with a scar running down his cheek, leans in closer to Dan, smirking as he crunches into the stolen apple. "Tastes pretty good for a farmer who doesn't talk much," he says, tossing the core onto the ground. The group erupts in laughter, their confidence growing. But Dan still doesn't flinch. Instead, he bends down slowly, picks up the apple core, and places it back on the stand without a word. Meanwhile, the crowd watches anxiously, murmuring among themselves. A young boy tugs at his mother's sleeve. "Why isn't he scared, Mama?" he whispers, eyes wide. The woman shakes her head, her voice low. Because Dan isn't just a farmer. He's more than that. The bikers are too busy entertaining themselves to notice how the mood has shifted. The once relaxed market now feels charged, like a storm brewing on the horizon. Dan glances up at the darkening sky, his calm exterior hiding something just beneath the surface. The bikers are oblivious to the growing unease among the marketgoers. They laugh louder, tossing produce between them like it's a game. One of them even kicks over a basket of ripe tomatoes, their rich red juice splattering across the dusty ground. But Dan remains still, his eyes tracking every movement, every laugh, like he's reading the group before making his move. Scarface steps forward again, emboldened by Dan's silence. "You're not much fun, old man." "Where's that farmer grid everyone talks about?" he taunts, leaning closer, his voice dripping with mockery. A tense hush falls over the crowd. Suddenly, the wind picks up, sweeping through the market and rustling the tarp above Dan's stall. The farmer finally speaks, his voice low but steady. "You should leave," he says, his words cutting through the laughter like a blade. The leader freezes for a moment, caught off guard by the weight behind this simple statement. Scarface chuckles, but it's forced now, the confidence in his voice faltering. Or what? He challenges, but there's a flicker of doubt in his eyes. The crowd shifts uneasily, sensing the moment teetering on the edge. Dan doesn't answer. He just steps forward, his steady presence now impossible to ignore. The bikers exchange glances, their bravado beginning to crack as the tension reaches its boiling point. Scarface takes a step back, his swagger faltering as Dan's calm confidence starts to feel more like a warning. The other bikers glance around nervously, their smirks fading. Just as the tension seems unbearable, the sound of a distant engine roars through the air. Heads turn as a truck pulls into the market, its rugged build and mud-splattered exterior instantly recognizable to the locals. Out steps a tall, burly man with a thick beard, Bill, Dan's longtime friend and neighbor. He's not alone. Behind him, a few other farmers climb out, each carrying an air of quiet determination. Word travels fast in these parts, and it seems Dan wasn't as alone as the bikers thought. The leader of the bikers tries to laugh it off, waving his hand dismissively. "What's this? A farmers' union?" He jokes, but the unease in his voice is clear. Bill steps up beside Dan, crossing his arms as he surveys the group of bikers. "You've had your fun," he says, his voice calm but firm. "Time to go before you regret sticking around." The bikers exchange uncertain glances, their bravado slipping as they realize the tide is turning. But Scarface, unwilling to back down, steps forward. "We're not scared of a couple of farmers," he snaps, though the flicker of doubt in his eyes suggests otherwise. Dan tilts his head slightly, his calm expression never wavering. "Couple of farmers?" he repeats, almost amused. The market crowd begins to shift, revealing more familiar faces. Other farmers, vendors, and locals who've quietly gathered in support. The bikers are surrounded, and for the first time, they realize they might be the ones in over their heads. Scarface's bravado crumbles as he glances around at the growing crowd. Farmers, vendors, and locals close ranks, their quiet unity more intimidating than any threat. The bikers, once loud and cocky, now stand uncertain, their usual tactics useless against a community that refuses to back down. Dan steps forward, his calm gaze fixed on Scarface. "This isn't about fighting," he says firmly. "It's about respect. Something you've clearly forgotten." His words hang in the air, weighted with the truth. Scarface hesitates, his hand twitching like he's debating whether to escalate or retreat. But before he can respond, a young girl from the crowd steps out. She can't be more than 10, her small hands clutching a basket of bruised apples. "You forgot these," she says, her voice steady despite her size. The market falls silent. The bikers exchange uncomfortable looks as the girl stands her ground. Scarface's face softens, and for a brief moment, his hardened demeanor cracks. He takes the basket awkwardly, mumbling, "Thanks, kid." The bikers begin to shuffle back toward their motorcycles, their energy deflated. As engines rumble to life, Scarface looks back at Dan, a mix of grudging respect and shame in his eyes. "You're lucky we're in a good mood," he mutters, though it's clear to everyone that luck had nothing to do with it. The bikers ride off, leaving behind a market buzzing with relief. But just as the crowd begins to relax, Dan picks up the apple core still sitting on his stand and tosses it into the dirt with a knowing smirk. "Next time, they'll think twice," he says quietly, his words carrying a promise that this wasn't just a lesson, it was a warning. As the dust settled and the rumble of motorcycles faded into the distance, the market slowly returned to life. Vendors began tidying their stalls, and the crowd buzzed with chatter, replaying the scene that had just unfolded. The young girl who had stepped forward was now surrounded by smiling faces, her bravery earning her quiet praise. Dan, ever the steady presence, went back to arranging his produce as if nothing had happened. Bill clapped him on the shoulder with a grin. "You handled that like a pro, as always," he said. Dan just shrugged, his lips twitching into a faint smile. "Sometimes standing your ground is all it takes," he replied. The market carried on, but something had changed. The locals felt a little prouder, a little closer, knowing they'd stood together against trouble. And as for the bikers, they wouldn't forget the lesson from the farmer who didn't back down.